Yes, excited about more Christmas at the movies? Well, it was a smashing Wednesday success as the First Baptist Church Ypsilanti Theater had 2 showings for the first time ever, I think. Yep. Pretty exciting theater moment. As I guess we needed both showings too, because if both would have been put together, it would have been too many at one time. So we're going to continue. Well, we have one more movie, but we'll get to that in a minute. So the idea has been that I was going to kind of take it easy with Christmas at the movies, right? That was the idea. But it seems like every time I dive in to say, what's the meaning of this? God's like, yeah, it's not so easy. Maybe it's a little deeper than this, and maybe we need to hash it out a little bit. So I think that's what we're going to continue to do this week as we look at this amazing movie, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. But I want to let you know what's coming up this Wednesday, because we're going to have 2 showings again. Yeah, here we go. So we're going to see Elf, which is by far my favorite Christmas movie. It's funny. Will Ferrell's crazy. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to come again, 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock. Doors will open at 5:30. Now, some of you are like really antsy and eager to get here, so I'm telling you the door will not open till 5:30, okay? So you can stand out there and knock or text, but it's on timer kind of deal, so they'll open at 5:30. So I encourage you, if you come at 5:30, to come through the black canopy door. Just kind of come in the black canopy. That door will be open down the steps and right into the theater. At 7:30, you guys are going to have to go to the main door. Okay? And so that one will open up at 7:30, and we'll start at 6 and 8. The movie's about an hour and a half. So those coming at 8 know that the movie won't start till 8. The first one at 7:30 kind of deal, but we'll still wait until 8 to start. All right, everybody's got it? Got the instructions? Okay, so here's our movie. How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Now, everybody know this book? Anybody have this book too? Really disappointing response there, actually. This was my favorite Christmas book to read. Now, last week I said Charlie Brown, me and Linus with the blankie deal, we really connect. But How the Grinch Stole Christmas, loved reading this to my kids just because I loved playing the different characters, and I love the way you got to read this book, right? I mean, it's just so much fun to read. And the movie we watched was Jim Carrey's version, which Jim Carrey is crazy and outrageous, and he was crazy and outrageous in this movie as well. I can't imagine how much he had lived and how much was actually in the script and not, but just a really, really interesting movie. And so the book kind of just starts with the Grinch just being, well, not a very nice guy, right? And what it says, I think on the first or second page, is that his heart is 2 sizes too small. And from the book, that's all we know, right? His heart's 2 sizes too small. We know in the end, yippee, he's a good guy because of Cindy Lou Who, which we'll get to as we continue the story. But the movie tries to, or makes an attempt possibly to unpack why the Grinch's heart is 2 sizes too small. Now, they don't give some explanation to the whole baby flying in the thing, right? The babies are flying in. That's how the people in Whoville get their baby. But somewhere along the way, the baby Grinch's basket hits a Whoville basket, because I think maybe he's going to some Grinchville or something. I don't know. But his basket gets sent to Whoville, and really I want to know the story of the Whoville kid that got sent to Grinchville, right? I mean, that's what I really want to know. So he gets there, and he lands at a house with these 2 ladies. And these 2 ladies take this kid in who's very different. Can we agree? He looks different, he talks different, and he eats different because they give him a plate of cookies, and he eats the glass of the plate instead of the cookies, and he can talk pretty well as little Grinch baby. Okay? And so we see this little guy, he's different. Acts different, looks different, talks different. And then we see little Grinch in school. And he's not received very well by his peers, is he? He's not liked, he's made fun of, he's mocked. Though this gal, Martha May, who seems to be the most popular girl in the school, has an eye for the little Grinch. But she really doesn't seem to want to promote that too much. Maybe it's because it'll affect her popularity. I don't know, because everybody else makes fun of the Grinch. And then it's Secret Santa or present time. And this is where we find out the Grinch is quite actually very gifted at construction and building things, right? His imagination is outrageously good. We know, we'll get later in the movie, we see his house and the amazing things he builds. But he puts together this amazing tree topper for Martha May. And he shaves because as a little boy, he's pretty hairy, if you haven't seen the little Grinch boy. And so he shaves, but we find out he nicks his face up, so he looks pretty goofy because he's got, like most of us guys when we nick, we put toilet paper all over our face, and we forget about it, and we show up at our job or work or something, and everybody's looking at that spot on our face, right, where we have the little toilet paper. And so he shows up. He has this amazing gift he's made for Martha May, but the teacher makes him show his face, and everybody laughs, makes fun of him, goes crazy, continues to ridicule him, breaks his thing, throws the tree, scares everybody away. And then we see him climbing up the mountain, and he says he's done with people. And so we get a backstory of why maybe his heart is 2 sizes too small. And so I want to start here because I think about this, and I think, right, is how we're treated, how people see us, how people aren't even maybe want to find out why we're different, don't question us about our differences, don't even applaud the skills we might have, but instead form judgments and opinions about us and put us in a corner. Maybe that just might drive us to a spot where we have a heart that's 2 sizes too small. That maybe the environment that the little Grinch guy grew up in was an environment of constant ridicule or constant like you're different or constant like kind of thing. And maybe because of that, he didn't quite develop. And so it gets me thinking, right, is we have a tendency to label people without even knowing people. We have a tendency to put a label on them and say, well, we know he's a green little goofy hairy dude, and I don't want to find out why the green little hairy dude is in my class or in my school or at my job or works with me. I don't want to find out, and really the little green hairy dude is so different that it must be all him or his problem, and we don't take the time to get to know about the green little hairy dude that might be next to us. But here's what I want us to know. Is we all have a story as to why we are the way we are. And Cindy Lou Who is going to find out the Grinch's story. She actually gets an interest in it. But I want to encourage us in this and challenge us in this. Before we come to conclusions, even on people that we think are vile, maybe we need to spend a little time figuring out and finding out their story. Before we make a judgment or put a label on anyone, maybe we should spend a little bit of time trying to figure out their story because we all have them and we're all formed by them. Right? I am formed because of my life, because of who my parents were, the classmates I engaged with, the path I took, the things I was involved in, the people who showed me love, the people who didn't show me love, the people who made fun of me, the people who embraced me. Right? I'm who I am today because of all of that. And then Jesus comes in, and yes, does he transform me and change me? Yes, but I am still who I am because of this long history and this long story. And there are people who are way back on my timeline in my story that still think I'm that guy at that point in time in my story. Right? Because they haven't walked my timeline with me. I have family members who think I'm still that 13-year-old, right? And who did certain things as a 13-year-old, which we won't go into, right? And so they still look at me as like that. They have no idea how many years later that I am a completely different person. So they live with me at that spot. And we're all guilty of that, aren't we? We're all guilty of saying, oh, I knew that guy when he was 13, 14, 28, 36, 49, right? I know him then. And so we label, we put a title on, and we take zero time to get to know them now. So I want to encourage us in that we want to know people's stories. Jesus wanted to know people's stories. Jesus cared about people, where they were from, and how they had gotten there. We want to be like that, okay? So, Cindy Lou Who finds out and hears about the Grinch. Because, by the way, you're not allowed to say his name in Whoville. If you say the Grinch, everybody just like, what's happening? But Cindy Lou Who is a little miffed about Christmas. Our characters, we seem to find out until our character next week who loves Christmas, but our characters are a little miffed about Christmas, right? And Cindy Lou Who starts with all the presents around her. She's questioning her dad. She uses big words, right? And she's just like, this just doesn't make sense. There must be something more. And so she decides that what should happen is in the town meeting where they're trying, I don't remember the title, I think they're trying to come up with the Christmas Meister or Cheermeister? Thank you. The Cheermeister. They're coming up with the Christmas Cheermeister, and the mayor apparently always becomes the Christmas Cheermeister. And Cindy Lou Who is standing in the back, and she yells out, "The Grinch." And everybody's like, how can this be? And this is where the start of 3 A words are used in this movie where we're going to focus. That they just kept jumping off the screen as I was doing amazing sermon prep, sitting in the theater, eating popcorn all by myself. I mean, that's great sermon prep, isn't it? Watching a movie, eating popcorn. Tough job, Chuck. Yeah, man, but someone's got to do it. And so these words are jumping off the screen at me, these A words, okay? And so here's the first word. The mayor says to Cindy, I think sarcastically and mockingly, but he says to her, "Oh, isn't Cindy Lou Who altruistic?" Oh, that's pretty intriguing, right? As she has nominated the Grinch. Well, what does this word mean? Webster's whatever Merriam-Webster says, it's an unselfish regard or devotion to the welfare of someone else. Someone who is caring about someone else. Not a bad word to be called. Right? Not a bad word to be called. Someone who cares about someone else. And so Cindy Lou Who says, I nominate the Grinch, and she then takes time to learn his story. And I don't know if that's before this or after this, I don't know, but she takes time to learn his story. She goes to the 2 ladies who raised him. They tell him stories. She goes to Martha May, who's remembering. She goes to people and says, what? Tell me the story about this guy. She doesn't just make a judgment like everybody else in the town has made a judgment. She says, I want to know why no one likes this guy. Why is he on the mountain? How did he end up on the mountain all by himself? And we can't say his name. And so Cindy Lou Who takes the time. The mayor calls her altruistic. I think it's true. Well, so she treks up the mountain all by herself to the Grinch's lair, as he calls it. And she knocks, Mr. Grinch, Mr. Grinch. He doesn't answer, so there's a dog door. And she crawls through it. And she starts to search out for Mr. Grinch. And she meets him, and I think when she meets him, he's having cymbals beat against his head from his big monkey thingy. And because he don't want to hear the noise that's happening and what's going on, and so he's doing that, and she touches him and freaks him out. And he tries to scare her, but then he calls her a word that starts with an A. And he says to her, what audacity of you to come up to this mountain. And then he actually says, like me. He relates himself to being audacious as well. Audacity, as we know, means intrepidly daring and recklessly bold. And so he has said to Cindy Lou Who that you are recklessly, daringly bold, essentially. That you, Cindy Lou Who, by trekking up the mountain, coming to my Grinchy lair as he's trying every way he can, and she giggles at him and says, I'm not afraid of you. Right? She knows his story. She knows he's been hurt. She knows he made this decision to isolate, which isn't good. We all know this, right? To isolate from others. And so she knows this about him. And so she's not afraid of the Grinch. And so Cindy Lou Who, the first half of this movie is called altruistic and audacious. Now you should be thinking of the person I'm going to compare her to. Don't announce it yet. You should know this already. Well then, the Grinch, I love the scene where he's trying to decide whether he's going to come and he checks his calendar. That's pretty funny. And the dog pulls the string and he sends him down. And so he comes down, he accepts his award and all this stuff. And as the movie is playing out, right, the Grinch just is not impressed. He feels like they're mocking him. He still feels like they're picking on him. And they may be, the mayor most likely is, and just not being nice. And the Grinch then calls the people of Whoville an A word, which is the exact opposite well, I don't know if it's the exact opposites, but it's pretty close to the opposite of altruistic, of what he's called Cindy Lou Who. He says to the rest of the people of Whoville that they are avarice. And this word, if you don't know what it means, is an excessive or insatiable desire for wealth or gain. And we recall in the beginning of this movie, where does it start? People throwing money at a cashier. People throwing money, wanting to get as many gifts as they can, wanting to get as much stuff as they can. And the Grinch says to them, you know what's going to happen to all these gifts? They're going to end up in the garbage, of which ends up by me, because the garbage dump is right outside his door. So all this excess, all this insatiable desire for more and more and more is eventually going to end up in the garbage anyway, and I'm going to end up with it. And so we have this contrast of the people of Whoville being called avarice and Cindy Lou Who being called audaciously altruistic, unlike the rest of the people, and willing to stand up against the rest of the people. And even though the Grinch comes down and creates havoc and steals all of their gifts, takes them all to the top, Cindy Lou Who is made fun of. Look, Cindy, what you've done by us saying this to the Grinch, and everybody's upset. Christmas is ruined, though we know it's not. They get their singing going on again. They're going to be okay because of Cindy's dad. What does Cindy do? Does she sit down and mope and say, oh, I guess there's no solution? No, she takes her audacious self back up the mountain to go find Mr. Grinch so that he and she can celebrate Christmas down in Whoville. She doesn't give up on the Grinch. Man, is that like a challenge to me? She does not give up, even though he's created havoc for the town. Because of her inviting him in initially, right? Because he's created all of this, she still is audacious and altruistic enough to not give up on the Grinch and believe there's something good inside of this guy, and she wants to go love on him and figure it out and invite him in to the community. And so she goes up, she's caught in the sleigh, right? It's tipping, the Grinch saves it, picks it up, blah, 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 and then the Grinch joins in the celebration and becomes part of the community again, because this little girl just thought differently, was willing to hear someone's story, was willing to take the time to care, and was willing to take a risk herself, not once, but twice, to invite the Grinch into the community. Yes, it got back to normal. Isn't it amazing? It's an amazing story. And we read about someone like this that had a little bit of this in her. You remember who it was? Yes. Remember the opening line I shared when we started that Ruth series? Came from a quote of a scholar I was reading. The Scroll of Ruth is a book about kindness and audacity, about altruism that propels people to act audaciously for the sake of others. Remember that story? This lady, this gal, this Moabite woman who was willing to give everything, take a complete risk of her own life for the sake of someone else. Her mother-in-law, Naomi. Amazing story, isn't it? She was audacious, she was kind, maybe she was altruistic, sure seems like it. She was willing to risk it all on behalf of someone else. And I know we wrestled with this as we went through this, and we tried to read the text, and we were struggling with this lady, Ruth, and we wanted her to be connected to Yahweh, right? We wanted that to be the reason, but Scripture was clear. She attached herself to Naomi first, and Yahweh became her God later. She attached herself to a human being first. She so was giving of herself to this other human that she gave herself first for another person, and Yahweh became her God later. Right? Because it's easy to over-spiritualize stories like that and say, well, you couldn't do that unless you had Jesus first. You couldn't really be that audacious unless you had Jesus first. You really couldn't unless you had Jesus first. But here was this woman, a woman of all people, who in Jewish literature that gave herself for another human being and then gave herself to Yahweh. Church, if that isn't an example to humankind of audacious kindness or audacious, the mayor said altruism. The Hebrew word that we know is hesed. And we gave it 3 definitions. We gave this word 3 definitions. This message went really from fun to really deep quick, didn't it? Because this is what we're called to as Jesus followers. We're called to be like Jesus, but we're called to be like Ruth. For the sake of other people. For the sake of other people. To sacrifice myself for the sake of others. To be recklessly bold in doing that. And we defined this. We gave it 3 definitions as we walked through this series of Ruth. This word, chesed. It's fun to say like that, isn't it? Chesed, yes. Loving kindness toward others. Right? Lucas picks songs not having any idea of what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say not having necessarily sing the songs. But as he sings the songs, and I'm looking like, these are the same words in this. God is amazing as he works it all out. But loving kindness toward others. Right? This amazing word, loving kindness in Hebrew, that it is a sacrificial, unconditional love and kindness toward other people. Toward. Without an expectation of anything in return. Okay, that love is out and not expecting some feel-goods back. Ruth gave herself to Naomi without an expectation of any feel-goods back from Naomi or anybody else as she made her way back with Naomi to Israel. Right? No expectation. She gave herself to Naomi. We come up with another definition. Well, we didn't come up with this. Other people were giving it to us. A steadfast, rock-solid care that remains faithful. Steadfast, always there, rock solid. Care for someone else that remains faithful regardless of the struggle or the challenge of said care. Regardless of it, right? It remains faithful as it walks out the dedication you have made or the commitment you have made to another human being. Unbelievable. We see Ruth do this. In the 3rd definition, love and loyalty that inspires merciful and compassionate behavior toward another person. Now, I don't know Cindy Lou who's loyalty here. I'm not going to stretch that, but love that inspires merciful and compassionate behavior. My love for another human being and my willingness to give that compassion and love to someone else, again, regardless of what comes back. You know the story. Ruth took a risk. This Moabite heading back. This Moabite going back with these widows. In that culture, oh my gosh, there's no hope. But in their man, these 2 women, I can't wait to meet them one day. As they just walk steadfastly together. And God provided and God took care of. And God blessed as they did that. But Ruth's commitment first was to Naomi. And I think about this goofy movie, this goofy book. I love these authors, right? We read them like, oh, it's so cute. But I'm wondering how deep the author was as they're telling stories like this, right? As they're like, oh, Dr. Seuss, right? But the depth of the understanding of this little girl going against all odds in her community. Everybody else wasn't on the same page as her. Her dad and mom got there against all odds. Says, I'm going to go love this dude. This misunderstood dude. This person that no one ever took the time, it seems, to try to understand him. That no one ever took the time to try to figure out why he might be a little bitter, of why he might be a little angry, of why he might be a little sad, of why he might be a little Grinchy. No one took the time to ask. And Cindy said, I'm going to figure it out. Because he deserves to be loved just like anybody else. Church, that's the gospel. You know, I saw, and I don't understand what's going on in our world, really. I saw this, not YouTube, Instagram reel thingy. And I normally don't listen to volume. I just kind of look and see if there's anything funny. And I saw this text of this guy. He was talking about Andy Stanley, who was a big church in Georgia as a son of Charles Stanley. And I thought, oh, he's going to say something nice about Andy Stanley. And he's like, Andy Stanley preaches to his many congregations that, that the gospel is about a circle that's wide open for people to be a part of. But he's wrong, this guy says. And he starts talking about Jesus in a way that I'm like, poof. If that's Jesus, see ya. Because that doesn't define anything remotely about love or mercy or compassion or anything about it. It seems like we want to shrink the gospel. That Jesus came for everybody to save them, not to condemn them. And actually, what we want the gospel to say is Jesus actually did come to condemn you. And until you figure it out or get it right my way, you're condemned. When the gospel is God came to save, not condemn. And when I think about it, it seems like a pretty good big circle and a pretty big opportunity for people to receive and hear the gospel. Cindy Lou Who had a big circle of who could be loved. Right? Ruth, willing to risk it all about who she was willing to love and die for. Jesus, I think his circle's pretty big about who he came to live and die for. Church, that's Christmas to me. Is Ruth, Cindy Lou Who, Jesus, people who are willing to give themselves completely for the sake of someone else. Man, I sure hope no one looks at me during Christmas season and says, gosh, is he avarice? I hope people look at me and say, my gosh, he's altruistic or he's audacious or something that says he's not like that. He seems to care a little bit. But are we willing to be like the Cindy Lou Who's of the world? Are we willing to be like the Ruths of the world and love people just because? Just because. We're going to close with the perfect song. I don't think we've sung it here before, have we? Maybe once, maybe twice, maybe. I don't know. For God so loved. As we sing this song, ask God to give you in your mind a person who needs to be loved. Ask God to show you, maybe a person from your past, maybe a person from your present, maybe someone you're like, no way. Ask him. Say, God, give me an image of the person that you want me to love, that I know you love, that you want me to make extra effort to make sure they know they're loved. All right? Ask him to do that for you. And I believe the power of the Spirit will do that. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, I'm glad that you came for everyone, not a few. The gospel message said, for Jesus so came to love 80,000. Or Jesus so came to love only those who act like this. Or Jesus so came to love only those who live like this. Man, I don't know what I'd do with that. But instead, the gospel says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have life forever. And follows it with saying, not come to condemn, he came to save. Thank you, Jesus, that you came for everyone. Forgive me, Lord. When I don't love like that. Forgive me, Lord, when I place labels or conditions without learning stories. without getting to know someone a little bit, without making an effort to understand. Lord, as we sing this song, we know, I hope we know how loved we are. If we don't, someone here sitting today that doesn't, man, receive the love today. You are loved. Lord, maybe, just maybe, there's someone in each of our lives that you want us to see, that you want us to love this month, this next year in an extra special way. Bring them to us, Lord. In Jesus' name.